You know, I've been wading pretty deep in the waters of late night television in the last couple years. So I wanted to say a few words about the end of Conan O'Brien's late night show, Conan on TBS.
I've been doing pretty much a nightly show, more or less nonstop since 1993. It's been 28 years, and we're in the process of wrapping it up right now on TBS.
I'm going to miss doing the nightly show, but our plan is to eventually reemerge on HBO Max at some point in some new form.
And he will have some future, they say, on HBO Max on some kind of a weekly talk show. But weekly talk show is not the same animal as the Daily Show. So since I am old enough to remember when Conan started on NBC in 1993, I thought I could at least bring that perspective, having seen sort of his entire career from beginning to end, at least as a talk show host. It was probably 1990 when I started watching late night television. My mom and dad, or at least my mom, would stay up and watch Johnny Carson, and I would stay up and usually just watch the monologue because we had to go to bed and get up for school or work the next day.
Folks, it's Americana tomorrow night, the Miss America pageant. How can you not watch that? I've got one of those, what do you call those programming things? VCR Plus.
Right.
Where you just type in a code?
Yeah.
You know what the code is for the pageant?
No.
362436. You
So that was kind of at the tail end of Johnny's run. I still thought he was funny. I don't know if he was kind of running on fumes, though. He had renegotiated his contract in 1980 to where he was only working 3 days a week, with Jay Leno hosting 1 day a week, and then I think a Carson repeat 1 day a week. Johnny hosted 3, and then he was only hosting 37 weeks a year with 15 weeks of vacation. I mean, who wouldn't like 15 weeks of vacation? So already at that time, Jay Leno was the permanent guest host, and he was hosting at least 1 day every week. And he was probably hosting all the weeks that Johnny was on vacation, or most of them. So anybody who watched Johnny was pretty familiar with Jay. Now, I liked Jay, especially when he was hosting Johnny's show.
This is not something to laugh about, really. Things in Alaska are looking pretty bad. I saw some news footage for tonight. They showed baby seals clubbing Exxon officials. Boy, I tell you.
I sort of felt like when he took the show over for himself that it never quite had the same flavor, which of course it wouldn't, because he wasn't doing Johnny's show anymore. He was doing Jay's show. But I never cared for Jay's show quite as much. Of course, on weeknights, I was only watching Johnny's monologue, but then on Fridays, I would stay up and watch the whole show and sometimes watch Letterman. So we discovered Letterman, my brother and I. And Letterman was funny mostly because he was just weird and unconventional, and he would take the camera out in the street and just drop stuff off buildings and just dumb stuff.
I'm talking about dropping stuff off a 5-story tower. You know, for years, experts have pretty much been in agreement that the turkey is a flightless bird. I don't think so.
I said this before that I think when the first late night war between Leno and Letterman happened, that it kind of went under the radar. Most of us didn't know there was a war. I don't think there was a ton of entertainment news reporting on it. But regardless, Letterman left NBC and went to CBS and was now head-to-head with Leno. And I generally watched Dave more than I watched Jay, although I saw both of them. And then, of course, NBC picked Conan to come in and follow Leno in late night in Letterman's old show. And most of us just said, who is this unknown guy? We've never heard of him. If I'd paid a little more attention, I probably would have known him from Saturday Night Live, because that was the era that I was watching. He was a writer on the show, but he did appear on camera a couple times, like in the Handsome Man sketch.
I never dreamed I could be this handsome. Thanks, Lank.
You're handsome. Give that man a round of applause.
And in the Nude Talk Show, does anybody remember the Nude Talk Show?
So, you guys like baseball? Yeah. Baseball's good.
For some reason, I remember the concept, and it wasn't until I rewatched it many years later that I realized that it was Conan as the guest. So maybe that was his first talk show experience.
The new talk show is dead last in the ratings. Look, it's even lower than Shrimp Circus and the Goofy Brothers.
But I don't think it mattered to me or anybody I knew that Conan wasn't some experienced stand-up comedian or some known celebrity, because if it had been a stand-up or somebody that the industry had known from some other talk show, I still probably wouldn't have known who he was. So he came out and he was young and he seemed likable enough. I don't think the writing was always good at first, and I'm not sure that the monologue was Conan's strong suit. I mean, Conan's a comedy writer, but he didn't come from like a stand-up comedy background, so maybe he was a little uncomfortable in front of the audience, and that kind of became part of his character as the show went on. And he would frequently make fun of how bad the monologue was or how bad he was. His self-deprecating humor was probably what won him over with a lot of people. And I remember in the early years when joke would bomb, unlike Johnny Carson, who seemed annoyed at the audience. Conan would be very apologetic, and he would actually drop down and do push-ups. Every time a joke bombed, he would give you 5 push-ups or whatever.
Why does every show have to have a monologue?
They don't really. I mean, mine actually has become almost, mine is as short a monologue as you can do. At the most, I'll tell 3 jokes. Sometimes I'll tell 2. I feel that it's important to say hello. It's nice to see you. We got a nice show. I'm in a good mood tonight. Let's go. In the monologue, I'll interact more with the audience. Someone in the audience, I'll ask them something. They'll say something.
Right,
There's a little bit of, and I actually think that that's the more valuable part of the show than the joke I have about Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley.
I think a lot of us found it amusing at first that he brought in Andy Richter as the sidekick, because with Johnny retiring and Ed McMahon as his sidekick, and Johnny was kind of the last guy with a sidekick. I mean, Leno didn't have one, and Letterman didn't have one, not sitting on the couch. It's funny, all the old hosts, if you go back, because before Johnny Carson, Jack Parr had Hugh Downs, and I think Steve Allen had Ernie Kovacs, and Joey Bishop had Regis Philbin. They all seemed to have sidekicks. So it kind of seemed like with Johnny's retirement, the era of the sidekick was over, and so Conan bringing another sidekick in, I don't know if that was done ironically, like we're going to do an old thing, because, just because of the fact that it's out of date, it's going to seem funny for us to keep doing it, or if it's just because Conan wanted somebody else to help share the load a little bit.
I never said to Andy, give me room, you can't get the laugh, I've got to get the laugh. The rule was always, if you think of the funniest thing, just say it, and that'll get us out, and he did it 100,000 times.
And of course, in the early days, anytime they did comedy bits at the desk, it was always Conan and Andy. So, because I remember Conan and Andy on the aisle doing movie reviews. They did the staring contest, which was probably my favorite one because it was so unfair to poor Andy. All of Conan's bits are like tailored to make Conan look like the jerk, which is more of the self-deprecating thing, which I think is kind of what makes it work. And then of course stuff like In the Year 2000.
Zero population growth will finally be achieved with the widespread use of a highly effective contraceptive, Michael Jordan cologne.
I mean, you already had a lot of the regulars starting to come in, like Brian McCann and Brian Stack.
Oh, if you've got a swollen sphincter, Raymond's here, squirt this up your little stinker. Raymond's here to help. Oh.
Happy holidays, little girl. Is your daddy home?
I'm not a little girl.
Please don't be insulted. Little girl is just a metaphor I use for gullible jackass.
Robert Smigel, these guys were writers for the show, but they got on camera once in a while with characters. And I think Smigel is the one who did most of the lips inside of the Clutch Cargo lips thing. Like Schwarzenegger, I think that was Smigel.
Before Jingle All the Way came out, Christmas was dead. It was nothing. People only jingled half the way. Sometimes even a quarter of the way. But then they saw my smash hit movie, and now they jingle all the way.
Who also did Triumph the Insult Comic Dog.
Who you got today, Conan? Who you got over? Oh my God, it's Kirky.
We can't control him.
Shatner, I got to say, I like your acting, Kirk. That's what I really like. He's acting. Bone, Spock, we must make contact with the Klingon ruler. Bone, Spock. Yes. That's terrific acting. For me too, Poopa.
And then there came the day when Andy Richter left the show, 7 or 8 years in probably, to go off and do other sitcoms and acting work and movies.
This is your last day, and I want to say, everyone's always asking me how you feel about this, and we're just going to miss you around here.
And I was disappointed at first that Andy left because he was such a part of the show, and I kind of wondered how Conan was going to get along without him. But in hindsight, what's sort of interesting over the next few years was that I felt that it forced Conan to become a much stronger comedian or comic presence. Most of his comedy bits were now tailored with Conan speaking directly to the audience instead of speaking to Andy or another character. He still had Max Weinberg.
I love reality television.
I love reality television also, Max.
And Joel Goddard, the announcer, there when he needed somebody to talk to, but he didn't do it quite as often. And then I think you started to see more of the character bits like Hannigan the Traveling Salesman.
Okay, drive a hard bargain. I'll give you the desk polish, the nose hair clippers, the pep pills, and a 3-hour Hungarian genital scrub for $10 even.
I don't want a 3-hour Hungarian genital scrub.
I do.
Joel?
And then we got to see Pierre Bernard's Recliner of Rage.
Hello there, Pierre. Are you comfortable and angry?
Comfortable and furious, Conan.
I really think that era of Conan on late night was his best era. At least I think that's when Conan was the strongest performer because he was doing it all by himself. And I think he grew, and I think he became equal to the task, you know. And he didn't really need Andy there beside him anymore. So there were a lot of people that when Andy returned, I think Andy returned for The Tonight Show to become the announcer, right?
Now that Conan is in line to get the actual Tonight Show, is this something that you have thought about going back, even if for a while?
No. No. I mean, you know, Jonathan Groff and I have joked that that the Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien is our retirement plan. Should we fall through every other showbiz crack, we'll land there.
It's not a shabby plan B, you know.
No, it's not bad at all.
And then definitely he returned on TBS, and a lot of people thought that was kind of a step back for Conan's show. But I think it was more of Conan liked working with him, and Andy liked working with Conan and being on the show. So, you know, I mean, if you can go to work every day and hang out with the people you're friends with, I guess that's the dream job, right? And it's not to take away anything from Andy, because I think Andy's funny, and a lot of times he's really good at having the last word when there's a bit or Conan's doing something or some guest is saying something. And Andy can just pop in with the topper right at the end. I think that's what he's really good at.
Henry, you have said that playing Superman is a little like sex. You've said that, and maybe you can elaborate on that. You did say that you've got to get comfortable in the role first and then sort of expand.
I suppose it's about getting into a rhythm I may have been going with.
This time, second time around, did it still feel like it's a little like getting into the rhythm? It's like sex, playing Superman?
It's like sex, but with a really aggressive partner.
In my experience, if somebody asks, do you bleed, don't have sex with them.
When the late night war with Jay Leno happened, I thought that was just funny. It was just fun to see all the entertainment shows. Now there were a lot more than just Entertainment Tonight. There was like 10 of those type of shows and other late night talk shows all commenting on it, and Letterman commenting on it. And it was just funny more than anything.
Well, our time here at NBC is just about up, but and I've been saying this all week. This is interesting. Until this last show ends, we can pretty much do whatever we want, and NBC has to pay for it.
So Conan left the Tonight Show and NBC, and there was a time when I suppose when basic cable like TBS would be a step down from broadcast television. I mean, he was still making good money. He still had a nice set. He was able to have the whole band. He was able to produce the same quality of shows he had before. So I'm not sure that anything was really lost in the transition. I probably never watched the TBS show as much as I watched Late Night on NBC, just because I was at the age where I was doing other things. But there would be little patches here and there where I would just start watching it again, and then I would watch it for a few months. And I had a DVR by then, so it was much easier to just record it and watch it later. Some of the good things that come out of TBS were like Wikibear. That was one of my favorite bits.
I can answer any question you have. I'm Wikibear.
What's the fastest animal on land?
The fastest land animal is the cheetah. It can reach speeds up to 75 miles per hour.
See? That was great information really fast.
Yeah. But it's still not fast enough to outrun Jack the Ripper. The notorious 19th century British serial killer who murdered at least 5 prostitutes. Lickety-split.
He was a terrible killer, Jack the Ripper, yeah.
And he was never caught or punished. What a clever fellow, yay!
I really liked Deon Cole when he came in. He was just such a charismatic guy. I just remember a bit where Conan was doing some kind of monologue in the foreground and Deon was like whizzing by him in the background on like a Segway.
I did it, Conan, I did it!
Okay, what have you done, Deon?
I went back in time, and guess what I got?
I don't know what you got.
Baby Hitler!
Even before Conan started doing the Conan Without Borders international travel shows, he was doing road shows. He would take, late night or Conan on TBS on the road. He would, broadcast out of Chicago for a week. He would do San Francisco for a week, or when he was in LA for TBS, he would go back to New York for a week. He could use somebody else's theater for the week and have kind of a different look. He would usually bring in guests that had some sort of a tie to that town or whatever. And then he would go do some remote pieces around the neighborhood, around the city, meeting locals or whatever. One of the ones I remember most, because I was kind of disappointed, was he played the historic Apollo Theater in Harlem. Harlem is a historically black town in New York, and the Apollo Theater was a historically black theater. The Apollo Theater was really a place where a lot of minorities had a chance to come get the spotlight, get on stage. They had a famous amateur night, which I think has been going for like 70 years or more. But even more than the acts that performed at the Apollo, the theater was known for the audience, who could be very unforgiving or extremely rewarding. They would mock and boo relentlessly anybody on stage who wasn't good or wasn't entertaining them. Likewise, if a performer was good, they would just applaud thunderously and just raise them up to God status. I mean, call me cruel, but I was looking for Conan to either get mocked and heckled and booed relentlessly, or to be praised to God level, and I didn't feel like I felt either of those things. In fact, Deon Cole even showed up to make a joke about it.
I want to make history here tonight. Okay. I want to be the very first black comic booed by an all-white audience at the Apollo. Yes!
It's kind of nice to see Conan go to Comic-Con and embrace nerd culture. Nowadays, it seems like a movie hype con. Conan's show is probably the best bit of it. You can't talk about traveling, of course, without talking about Conan Without Borders. This very interesting thing he started doing. I think the first one, sort of on Conan on TBS, was when he went to Cuba, because the embargo from traveling to Cuba had been lifted after 50 years or whatever. So that was pretty neat. If you look back, though, you can find the roots of it back on NBC on late night. Conan did a couple travel shows, like he went to Finland because he said that a group of Finnish audience members had been showing up to his show for some reason, like several nights in a row in the audience in New York, and they told him that he looked exactly like the president of Finland, who was a woman. So Conan traveled to Finland and, did the whole Without Borders thing where he went around and talked to people all over.
We just passed this door, and I'm sorry, I have to meet Force Fagerstrom.
Fagerstrom, I'm waiting. Fagerstrom! Get out here! Fagerstrom, I know you're in there!
Eventually ended up meeting the president. I guess she was running for re-election at the time, and so Conan did a campaign ad for her, and he likes to claim that that's the reason she won re-election. Conan, I think, also went to Ireland during the NBC years, and he did a lot of other remotes. But the TBS years, the Without Borders, Cuba, and then Greenland, and then Mexico, and all these other places. Conan mentioned in one of his interviews that he'd kind of been inspired by Michael Palin.
I've always secretly, in the back of my head, thought I'd like my show to eventually one day morph into a show where I'm not bound in a studio, but I'm all around the world.
Yeah.
And is it Michael Palin?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. Michael Palin did it. He did a version of it, and I thought I would love to do my spin on that someday.
Michael Palin, of course, a member of Monty Python, the comedy troupe from England. Starting, I think, in 1987, he did a BBC travel documentary show. First one was Around the World in 80 Days, which I guess was based on the Jules Verne novel.
It's exhilarating and unfamiliar, especially in the bird market. A long street proffering feathered friends for all your needs. For singing, eating, fighting, or just a chat.
Hello. Hello. I've been in a sketch with you once.
I guess it was so good that they brought him back every few years to do another one, Pole to Pole and Full Circle. So if you like Conan's things, you might check out Michael Palin's. Most of them are on DVD, some of them are on streaming. And it's no wonder that Conan was inspired by that for his, at least partially, and gives him some credit. And I think the travel shows really speak to another point, that I always see people on YouTube and everywhere saying that Conan was the greatest of all time who ever hosted a late night talk show. I don't know that I agree with that because I grew up with all the other ones first, and then Conan was kind of the next version of that. and I don't know that I ever saw him as the greatest of all time. I mean, I really like Conan, but I think every late night host has a certain strength that they can play to, and there's probably people that are better interviewers than him or better monologue comedians than him. I think Conan, what he does best is the really off-the-wall comedy bits.
That's right, I said great comedy. Okay? Not any of the silly, go-nowhere, arbitrary humor that we're known for. Isn't that right? Cactus Chef playing We Didn't Start the Fire on a flute?
He said this in the final episode, which he's probably said many times, which is the intersection of smart and stupid is what he finds really interesting, and kind of surrealist stuff. But where I give Conan a lot of credit, and like I said, Johnny Carson seemed to be kind of winding down after 30 years, and Conan seems to be stronger than ever. He may have ended the TBS show, and he may have shortened it to 30 minutes from an hour. The fact that he's going to continue to do some sort of talk show while also doing a podcast, while also doing the travel shows, well, I don't know if he's going to still do Clueless Gamer, but Conan seems to have really embraced a lot of new media technologies and having an online presence. I mean, it's kind of a sign of the times, and who's to say that Johnny Carson, if he was alive today, wouldn't be doing Twitter and stuff. But I think Conan really showed, like with Serious Jibber-Jabber, which was a web show he did for TeamCoco.com, where he did long-form interviews with people. I think he showed that he can do that same kind of thing. It just depends on what environment he's put into. I think when he's in front of the live studio audience on his nighttime talk show, he wants to be silly and be crazy and make everyone laugh. Whereas in the empty room with one other guest, he can just have a serious conversation.
Need a neurosurgeon to come in here and talk about this part, but I got the sense reading your book that one of the side effects of a stroke might be monomania, or where you're just, you start thinking about how this mug is black, but not quite as black as the table, and if you're having an episode, I'm just then become obsessed with how do I get this mug to be as dark as the table, and should we get a lighter mug or a darker table, and I can't break myself free of that obsessive thought, and that's what it starts to feel like with Woodrow Wilson, is that he just, League of Nations, 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 and he can't let it go.
And I will will it into existence.
So the ending of this show doesn't feel like he's retiring. It feels like he's ending the show because it's going to free him up to do a lot of other stuff. And that's not something I'm sure I could say about Johnny Carson or David Letterman. I mean, Jay Leno obviously is still going strong. He has, 2 car shows on TV, I think, and now he's going to be hosting a game show or something. So say what you will about Jay Leno, but they always say he's the hardest working comic in the business, and that seems to still be kind of true. Conan did say, and I heard David Letterman say the same thing, that one of the reasons for ending the daily talk show is because when you have 4 shows a week, you have to have guests on there. So sometimes you're filling in with guests that maybe aren't that interesting. It's just who you could get. Or it's somebody there that's just there to plug their show that's on the same network, so you just have to plug it. And Letterman said the same thing about switching to his Netflix show, which is, I'm tired of interviewing people that I'm not interested in. And I think Conan said pretty much that same thing.
I started looking at my hour-long show and looking at how it's represented on YouTube, which is how most people see it and should see it. And I said, these two don't relate to each other. So I changed my show to look more like it would on YouTube. We just do half an hour and I talk to one person, as opposed to a show that is comedy, first guest that you want to see, second guest you don't care about, third guest you don't care about. And I hate to say that to the second and third guests of the world, but I decided I'm too long in the tooth, I've been doing it too long. I don't want to say it was great talking to you, now we're going to stick around for that guy who's 19 and he just got on a show where he plays a brooding teenager. He's never had a life experience. His big disappointment in life is they didn't have the Porsche in the color gray he wanted, and I'm supposed to pretend to care about him. So I couldn't do that anymore.
If I can indulge myself for a minute, one of my favorite bits of the TBS era was fan corrections, where Conan invited guests to, if you spot an error in my show, write into us and tell us about it, and I'll acknowledge it on the air.
If you think you spotted an error on our show, report it at teamcoco.com/haha. I found an error. We will sort it out right here on the air. Let's see if you've got what it takes to make chump meat out of the maestro.
Well, people started sending in videos of themselves catching Conan in a mistake, And then, of course, Conan would play it on the air, and then he would go to great lengths comedically to explain why it wasn't really a mistake and how they were all wrong and he was always right.
Hi, Conan. This is Stephen from Provo, Utah. I noticed that you made a really embarrassing mistake, and I'm here to correct you. You mispronounced the name of this really important Star Wars character.
They pulled some products off the shelf, like Admiral Akbar brand fly traps.
The name of the Mon Calamari admiral who fought for the Rebel Alliance at the Battle of Endor is Akbar, not Akbar, as you pronounced it.
Well, I'm sorry, Stephen, but you are dead wrong. The character's name is pronounced Akbar. Now, maybe it was Akbar back in 1983 when the movie first came out, but any real Star Wars fan knows that George Lucas went back and made changes to the original trilogy.
Admiral Akbar, please.
Thank you, Mon Mothma. But actually, the name is pronounced Akbar. In fact, the only reason I've agreed to participate in this attack is because Darth Vader insisted on mispronouncing my name as Akbar. I will destroy Vader, both for calling me Akbar and for making fun of the way I look.
It's funny that as the bit evolved, that the people sending in videos with Conan's mistakes would get more and more hostile towards him. They would kind of say, "Look what you did again, dumbass," or whatever. Maybe not in those words, but they kind of became a little hostile, and then he would become kind of hostile back to them. I thought that was kind of the fun of it. So this was one of the spans of TBS where I was watching a lot. And I started specifically watching it, trying to catch an error. I had my notepad ready, you know, I could write down what day it happened and I could write what the mistake was, or I could check, I was looking for any sort of factual claim he made that could be checked to see if he made a mistake. I wonder if he made any on purpose just to give people some ammo. I don't know. But so I finally caught one. I thought it was a mistake, or at least it was worth mentioning, which was that in one of Conan's monologue jokes, he said that the Olympics were going to introduce Frisbee golf as a new sport. And I thought, well, I'm sure that's not what it's called, because if you know Frisbee golf, you know that that's what we called it back in the 80s or the 70s or whatever. But by now, it's definitely not known as Frisbee golf anymore, because Frisbee is a trademark name. So I decided to send a video into Conan where I said, "Oh, you idiot, it's not Frisbee golf, it's disc golf." And I thought, what can I do, though, to distinguish myself? Because if you look at they used to have a submission page on Team Coco. I don't think it's there anymore. There was hundreds of other people. They, I think, would post ones, even ones that didn't make it on the air. They would post all these other submissions. So there was hundreds and hundreds. And so I thought, how would I get noticed? So I thought, well, what if I have my son do it with me? I came up with this whole idea. I wrote this whole script for us where my son, who was like 10 at the time, and, I just put out a thumbnail that showed me and him, and people would go, "Oh, that's different," because usually they were like college-age kids or 30-year-olds or whatever. So I wrote this script, and I was going to give my son all the best lines, kind of like self-deprecating myself, And I would say, "Oh, Conan, you blew it. You said Frisbee golf, but it's actually called," and then I would point to him, and he would say disc golf. And then I would say, "Because Frisbee is a trademark of," and then he would say, "the Whammo Company." We had like 4 back and forths where I would say something, and then he would say something, and then I would say, and then he would say. And we would get through the first one, and then we would screw something up on the second one. So I wanted to go through it again in one take. And when we would do the first one again, he would just improvise. Mr. O'Brien, we've been very impressed so far with your flawless track record.
Nearly.
But we believe that we have spotted an error in your show.
Yes, we did.
On August 3rd, you said...
Dates don't matter.
Well, when you said that the International Olympic Committee was considering Ultimate Frisbee as a new sport.
The International Olympic Committee has officially recognized Ultimate Frisbee as an Olympic sport. Yeah, the news was greeted with excitement by thousands of guys named Chad.
Well, even my son knows that Frisbee is a brand name trademarked by
the Whammo Toy Company.
And the actual name of the sport is
Ultimate.
That's right. And then at the end, after I stated my case, I said, "I guess he's the maestro now." And my son said, "Chump." That's what I scripted. But my son didn't want to call Conan a chump, so he wouldn't say the line. So then I sort of made him say it together with me or something. I would have expected a Harvard man to know that, Conan. I guess that makes him the maestro now. Chump. Anyways, we cut together a whole piece. It was just fun. It was a fun thing for us to do. I sent it in. Conan never ran it, obviously because he knew he was wrong and he couldn't prove otherwise. So I kept watching and watching, seeing if I could find another one so I could do it again and do it even better and get on the air this time. And I found another one. Conan mentioned, and forgive me because I forget the numbers now, but he said something like William Shakespeare had written 36 plays. And I said, oh, I can check that number and see if it's right. And so I checked online, and it turns out Shakespeare wrote 37 plays or something like that. And so I said, oh, I'm going to get him on this. And I imagine this whole scenario. I said, I'm going to be sitting in a fine restaurant with a nice suit on, camera rolling, and I'm going to say, Conan, this is getting ridiculous. I've caught another mistake, in reference to my first video, which you probably never saw. And then I would say, oh, foolish Conan, you said there was only 36 plays from Shakespeare, but there was actually 37, and then I was going to name them off. And this was going to be hard for me because I'm really bad at memorizing lines. I did acting and stuff in college, and I'm good, and I learned enough to know that I'm really bad at memorizing things. Maybe I could act okay if I could get off the page, but I couldn't get off the page. I couldn't memorize my lines. So trying to memorize 37 Shakespeare plays, I was probably going to have a hard time with. I was going to probably have to write cue cards and put them all around the camera and stuff. So I was going to rattle off 37 plays in no particular order. Couldn't be alphabetical. Couldn't be historical, like when they came out. Because I wanted to end the last one. I was going to say, and last but not least, the one that reminds me most of your show, A Comedy of Errors. And then I was going to have a waitress come over right then with a plate with a bird on it, like a Cornish game hen or some small chicken, you know. And she was going to say, excuse me, sir, did you order the crow? And I would say, no, ma'am. Mr. O'Brien will be eating that. That was my idea. It's really stupid. But then I thought, in order to film that, I'm going to have to memorize my lines. I'm going to have to get camera, lighting equipment, and find a restaurant to shoot in and find an actor to play the waiter or waitress and get a suit and all this stuff. And I thought it's just too much work. It's not going to get seen. So I never filmed that one. But that would have been fun. So now it lives on here in this video. Conan had a ton of great comedy bits over the years. Most of the ones I mentioned in this video are my favorites.
What's happening, Conan? Andy? Dig it? The pimp bot is here.
As a young boy in Killarney, so many years ago.
How about a sweet little song I used to sing for all the ladies?
Well, that sounds nice. Okay, sure.
All right, here you go. Oh, women shouldn't be allowed to talk.
What's the movie going to be called?
Really? I know what it's going to be called.
Yeah, what's that?
If it's got Carrot Top in it, you know what a good name for it would be?
What's that, Norm?
Box Office Poison.
You got up, you had your whey and oat shake, then what?
Then I prepared my body in various ways. I cleaned it.
But there was one that sticks out in my mind. I don't know why this one sticks in my mind. This one just had me on the floor laughing more than any other bit. And I don't think it was one that got very popular, but Conan was doing a bit about mascots for like college sports teams. And you know how they're really goofy, and they're like goofy characters, like cartoon characters created as these giant, wearable costumes. And I guess the joke was how ridiculous they are. So Conan's, of course, were 10 times more ridiculous. Sometimes they just wheel the characters across the stage on like a little cart if they're just like a big statue or something that doesn't move. So they're just some stagehand pushing somebody on a cart. I think that was part of what made it funny. And then he says, and the next mascot is, and then this thing comes out.
This next mascot... Next mascot's the pride of the Red Sox farm system. Please welcome the Pawtucket Chewbacca stuck in a hole. If I didn't see it, I can't be blamed.
Just the sight of a Wookiee banging hysterically against the stall door and moaning was just something I never forget and probably would never see on any other show. So that's it, 28 years of late night with Conan O'Brien. It's been very fun and very entertaining along the way. He's had to endure a writer's strike, a COVID lockdown, a late night war, a couple of format changes, I guess anybody that's on the air long enough is going to have to go through this stuff. So there are a lot of things you could say about a show like Conan's that aren't unique to his show. Like he introduced me to a new musical guest or a new comedian, but every show does that if you watch it long enough. But this was just the show that I watched. So I just wanted to say, after 28 years of late night, thanks for all the laughs, Conan, and good luck on all of your new shows that you're doing, and I hope you're still on for a long time.
Hey, let me ask you this. Did you ever toss a prostitute off a bridge?